Hi, I'm Luke Hindmarsh.
And I'm Damien Humphreys.
We are,
In Deep Crit.
and we're back in Deep Crit, looking once more at the class options as presented in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And this is part 3 of our 3-part video series on it. So without further ado, here's the next class. Next up, we've got the Sorcerer and the optional class features there. Again, surprise, surprise, at first level, additional Sorcerer spells. And there's in fact, it includes some further cantrips, lots of ones from Tasha's. And these are a nice little selection, which we'll go into, as I say, in more depth with our detailed look at the Sorcerer class as a whole. Next, Sorcerers get at third level meta magic options, which are Seeking Spell. If you make an attack roll for a spell and miss, you can spend 2 sorcery points to re-roll the d20, but have to take the new roll. And you can use Seeking Spell even if you've used another meta magic option when you've cast the spell. Transmuted Spell is the next option, and that allows you to use 1 sorcery point to change the type of damage done to either acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, or thunder. So that could be very useful. Sorceress Versatility at 4th level Sorcerer feature. Try saying that several times in a row. Sorceress Versatility allows you to replace one of the options you chose for the metamagic feature with different metamagic options available to you, or replace one cantrip you've learned from the class's spellcasting feature with another cantrip from the Sorcerer spell list, and that is at any of those ability score improvement levels. And then finally, we've got Magical Guidance at 5th level, which allows you to tap into your inner wellspring of magic to try to conjure success from failure. So whenever you make an ability check that fails, you can spend 1 sorcery point to re-roll the d20. You do have to take the new roll. Damien.
Yeah,
Sorcerers.
there's some good additions to the spell list. Like you said, some of the cantrips are reprinted from previous sources. I think the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide had Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade in originally. There's a couple of new nice ones from Tasha's. Having played a sorcerer recently, my 2 favourites from there would be Mind Sliver as a cantrip and Tasha's Mind Whip as the 2nd level spell. There's a really good synergy there. Yeah, they've added some good spells that possibly the sorcerer was missing in the first place. And we'll discuss spells at a later date, and spells for various casters and spells added in Tasha's, etc. Meta magic options. More options is always good. The Seeking Spell.
Are these any good?
Yeah, they're okay. Well, the Seeking Spell is okay. I'd say Transmuted Spell is really good. 2 sorcery points to re-roll the d20. Must use the new roll. If there's a clutch situation, again, this says if you make an attack roll and a miss, so it's after you've been told that you miss, and if you know you've only missed by a short amount, you've just quickened your big spell to hit the big bad, and you just miss a little bit. Might be worth having that re-roll. Would I take it over some of the other options available? Possibly not. Transmuted Spell is one that I would definitely think about taking, because obviously as you get higher up in the game, more creatures become more resistant or immune to certain types of damage. If I'm fighting a red dragon, but I'm a primarily fire-based spellcaster, I'm not going to get very far. Whereas the ability to change that fire damage to cold damage is going to
Cold ball.
Yeah.
Instead of fire.
Bolt of cold.
Bolt of cold.
If you know the weaknesses of your enemy, that's very useful.
Kind of Transmuted Spell kind of requires you to have that sort of familiarity. So if you're a new player, you are going to perhaps have to be helped a little bit. You might, I mean, maybe if your DM lets you make an Arcana roll to say
Yeah.
work out what the weaknesses of a particular creature are. A seeking spell. I'm not sure about this, so I'm going to ask. If you rolled if you rolled a 1, natural 1, you could use seeking spell to re-roll that, couldn't you?
Yes.
That could be potentially pretty useful.
Yeah.
But it's not OP, I don't think.
I don't think so.
Neither of these seem as OP. They're quite balanced.
You essentially get 1 sorcery point per level of sorcerer. So it's a limited resource, and they only come back on a long rest, not a short rest. So, you do have to be careful with. You can't just pew 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 all your sorcery points in the first.
Well,
combat.
you can, but then you regret it.
You can, and maybe I have done, but keeping some in reserve is always useful. Sorcerer's versatility, as you say, quite hard to say.
Yeah, try saying that a few times so quickly.
Yeah, cool. More versatility. You can change your meta magic features with a different one, or replace a cantrip. Yeah, more versatility is good. And sometimes you take a meta magic feature that turns out to not be as useful or as good as you thought it might be. There's some are better than others. Same with fighting styles and maneuvers for the martial classes. Some of them are better than others. So yeah, this is if you realise you've made a mistake or you want to take your character in a different direction, this is very useful.
Magical guidance. I mean, getting out of only casting spells in combat into the utility side of things and being, looking at ability checks. That's nice, isn't it?
Yeah. So I've used this once on Friday night in our game. And I managed to roll 1 lower on the D20 after spending a sorcery point than I did the first time. So I turned a 7 into a 6, which was, very
magical.
Useful.
And it's interesting that the sorcery re-rolls, when you look at something like Monk, where they have, the key points, sorcery points and key points aren't exactly comparable, but they're a limited resource.
Yeah.
And here you've got it a re-roll as opposed to like the Monk being able to just add 2 to their attack roll or something.
Yeah.
I don't think that's as balanced. I mean, I'm not sure they've considered the balance differential between those two. But I don't know. I don't think this is unbalanced.
No, I don't think so.
It's not as sweet as I'd have liked it to be.
It's interesting to say that it's worded when you make an ability check that fails, because initiative is technically an ability check, but you can't fail an initiative roll. You can just roll high or low or medium. There's no failure.
It can feel like a failure.
It can feel like it, but it's not technically a failure because there's no target DC. So you wouldn't be able to use that on an initiative roll.
It wouldn't allow, would it or would it not allow you to use it for saving throws?
No, because it's ability checks.
It's because it's ability checks, so it's not saving.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that's the sorcerer.
That's the sorcerer. And next up, bound to the whims of an otherworldly master or indeed mistress, we have the Warlock, and some new features presented in Tasha's there. At first level, they're a caster, so they get some additional Warlock spells, including the cantrips that are offered in Tasha's, some of which are reprints from other sources. There's some nice additions to there. They get some of the new summon spells, which are thematic for them. Some nice additions. At third level, you get a new Pact Boon option. So when you choose your Pact Boon feature at third level, the following option is available to you. And this is Pact of the Talisman. So your patron gives you an amulet, a talisman that can aid the wearer when the need is great. When the wearer fails an ability check, they can add a d4 to the roll, potentially turning that into a success, and this ability can be used a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and all expended uses are restored when you finish a long rest. If you lose the talisman, you can perform a 1-hour ceremony to receive a replacement from your patron, and that can be performed during a short or a long rest, destroys the previous amulet. The talisman turns to ash when you die. At 4th level, you'll get Eldritch Versatility, which is the Warlock version of versatility that's offered to all the classes in Tasha's. So when you reach a level that grants the ability score improvement, you can do one of the following. Replace one cantrip you've learned from your Pact Magic feature with another one from the Warlock spell list, or you could replace the option you chose for your Pact Boon feature with one of that feature's other options. And if you're 12th level or higher, you can replace one spell from your Mystic Arcanum feature with another Warlock spell of the same level. If this change makes you ineligible for any of your Eldritch invocations, you must also replace them now, choosing invocations for which you now qualify. Speaking of invocations, there are a number added in Tasha's as new invocation options. Bond of the Talisman, which has a prerequisite of 12th level Warlock and the Pact of the Talisman features. When someone else is wearing your talisman, you can teleport to an unoccupied space close to them, and the wearer can do the same thing to you. That can be used a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, which is restored on a long rest. Eldritch Mind gives you advantage on Constitution saving throws you make to maintain concentration. That has no prerequisites. Far Scribe has the prerequisite of a 5th level Warlock and Pact of the Tome feature. New page appears in your Book of Shadows, and with your permission, a creature can use its action to write its name on that page, which can contain a number of names equal to your proficiency bonus. And you can cast the Sending spell without using a spell slot and without using material components to any creature whose name is on that page. And the mechanics of that is you write the message on the page, the target hears the message in their mind, and if they reply, it appears magically on the page. And as an action, you can magically erase a name on the page by touching it. Gift of the Protectors. Prerequisite is 9th level Warlock with a Pact of the Tome feature. Another new page appears in your Book of Shadows, and with your permission, a creature can add its name to that page using an action. Again, number of names equal to your proficiency bonus. When any creature whose name is on the page is reduced to 0 hit points but not killed outright, the creature magically drops to 1 hit point instead. Once this magic is triggered, no creature can benefit from it until you finish a long rest, and you can erase a name by touching it as an action. Investment of the Chainmaster, which is prerequisite Pact of the Chain feature. When you cast Find Familiar, you infuse the Summon Familiar with a measure of your Eldritch power, granting the creature the following benefits. The Familiar gains either a flying speed or swimming speed, your choice, of 40 feet. As a bonus action, you can command the Familiar to take the attack action. The Familiar's weapon attacks are considered magical for the purposes of overcoming immunity and resistance. If the Familiar forces a creature to make a saving throw, it uses your spell save DC. And when the Familiar takes damage, you can use your reaction to grant it resistance against that damage. Next up is Protection of the Talisman. Prerequisite 7th level Warlock Pact of the Talisman feature. When the wearer of your talisman fails a saving throw, they can add a d4 to the roll. And this benefit can be used a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. All expended use is restored when you finish a long rest. Rebuke of the Talisman. Again, prerequisite of having the Pact of the Talisman feature. When the wearer of your talisman is hit by an attacker that you can see within 30 feet of you, you can use your reaction to deal psychic damage to the attacker equal to your proficiency bonus and push it up to 10 feet away from the talisman's wearer. The last one is Undying Servitude, which has a prerequisite of being a 5th level Warlock, and you can cast Animate Dead without using a spell slot. Once you do so, you can't cast it in this way again until you finish a long rest. There was quite a lot there, Luke. What's your opinions?
I mean, I must say, I don't think the additional Warlock spells are hugely relevant till a bit later on. Some of the later ones fit the Warlock better and make up for some of the spell selections. But being a Warlock, you're going to want to be very careful about your spell selection. And although there's some tempting ones here, we'll obviously do a full-on analysis of the Warlock down the line. But I must say, I'm not as hugely impressed with these as some of the others. But then again, I'm playing a Warlock at the moment, so I'm probably thinking, why isn't it better?
I think the synergy with Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade as a Hexblade Warlock could be quite nice.
That's a point. Yeah, if you are a Hexblade, then they fit better. They're more useful. but I don't really like the way lots of discussions I've seen go on about hexblades, and I'm more of a different kind of warlock.
Other Warlock subclasses are available.
Yes, exactly, and they're actually really good.
Yeah.
But anyway, packed boon options, packed to the talisman. This is interesting because it's a failing an ability check, so it's not saving throws, it's not attack rolls or spell casting rolls. Potentially useful for utility, but I'm in two minds about pact to the talisman. Has some nice eldritch invocations, however. Don't know if you've got a different insight onto that option.
Yeah, I think with the invocations later on, you can turn into quite a nice buff
Yeah,
for a member of your party, either yourself or another member of the party.
yeah,
So you could give your talisman to the rogue, which gives them an extra D4 on their chances to pick a lock or detect traps,
yeah,
disarm a trap, that kind of thing, and their saving throw for when they fail to disarm the trap, and so on. I think it's a useful utility buff, probably more for another member of the party than for yourself.
yeah. Which is nice. Nice to be able to play that supporting role. Warlocks can make a nice supporter.
A selfless warlock, I've never met one.
It's Pact of the Celestial. They do exist. Uh, and of course, those who are out for the greater good, but we'll not get into that today. Eldritch versatility is, of course, just versatility that all spellcasters and indeed some of the martial classes are getting. Nice to be able to change your cantrips. So, really, with warlocks, being able to change your cantrip, I think, is quite a bit more important because as you are dropping out spells as you increase in level, the ability to pick a cantrip that then synergizes better is
Yeah,
quite important. I'm not going into detail about that, but if you have a cantrip that's got concentration, for example, you don't want to hang on to that when you're wanting to have a concentration spell running.
yeah, sure, yeah,
As an
yeah,
example, changing your pact boon, I think that makes sense. Depending on the kind of warlock you're playing, it could be quite useful. I mean, if you're a hexblade, you're not really changing your pact boon from pact to the blade. But
yeah,
if you are trying out the talisman, pact to the talisman, or you are maybe pact to the chain master, and you want to pact to the chain, and you want to switch to pact to the tome because you want more spells, or the other way round because you wanted a familiar. This is nice to be able to do that. Um,
yeah. And it's interesting to note that it states that if that makes you ineligible for any invocations, you need to change those at the same time. So you
yeah,
can't
so
hang on to your old invocations, which makes
there's
sense.
there's loss. So I mean,
Yeah,
you would presumably, if you switch from being packed to the chain, you lose your familiar.
yeah,
Poof, bang, gone. Um, I like the fact that at 12th level or high, the Mystic Arcanum, they are so you've got to pick them correctly, and it's easy to make a mistake and choose something that isn't so useful throughout the campaign. So being able to change that,
yeah,
you're not going to be able to change it very often, but the chance to do it is, I think, quite important for a warlock.
yeah. Indeed, indeed.
Without analysing the Eldritch invocations in too much depth, because obviously we're going to do a video on warlocks. I mean, I'm just going to pick out that I really, really, really like Investment of the Chainmaster
Yeah,
for turning your familiar into. So, say you have an imp, suddenly it's going to be pretty tough, and I would definitely take this as soon as I could because I think it's amazing. I quite like Undying Servitude for being that slightly necromantic type
yeah,
warlock.
yeah. It gives
Um,
you an extra meat shield in combat, right?
yeah,
Um,
an Eldritch Mind, I suppose, if you can't take Warcaster, you haven't taken Warcaster, that could be a very useful option, particularly for the dreaded Hexblades.
yes,
I
yeah.
suppose.
And it saves you having to take that feat of Warcaster if you're not necessarily ever going to use your reaction to cast a spell. If you
Yeah.
get an opportunity attack, advantage on concentration is always going to be useful.
Yes. Yeah.
Having
Absolutely.
had a character die from drowning because they lost concentration on their polymorph spell, yes,
It's interesting. It wouldn't stack with Warcaster though. You can't get
You can never get double
advantage
advantage. No.
twice. And if you're cancelling out one advantage because of disadvantage, you're still cancelling it out. So you're
Still
not.
cancels out. Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't. They don't ever stack or
So yeah. So
you
no
either
point
have it or
taking
you
this
don't.
if you've. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. There we go. So that's the Warlock until we come and analyse in more detail. In more detail.
Indeed.
As we reach the end of our review of the optional class features, we're left with the Wizard. Turning through our pages of mystery spell books, we first of all find that they get an additional Wizard spell list, surprise, surprise, starting at first level, allowing them access to all of these new and not so new Tasha's cantrips and a range of fairly good new spells and some old that perhaps Wizards probably should have had already, but there we go. They also have quite a nice selection. Then moving on at third level, we come to cantrip formulas, which is allowing the wizard to change on whenever they finish a long rest to replace the wizard cantrips that they know with another wizard cantrip from the wizard spell list. There's only one wizard cantrip you can change at any given time. But what do you think about that? Should we look at it back to front, since we've been going in order all this way, starting with cantrip formulas? What
Yeah.
do you think about that?
It's really nice. And it's, other spellcasters have had the versatility option to change cantrips at ability score improvement levels.
Yeah.
This is giving you it on a long rest, so essentially your spell book has all the formulas in it for all the cantrips that you would have learned at wizarding school, or from your master, or however you learnt your spells originally. And yeah, so you can swap one out for another one as long as it's on the wizard spell list. This adds to versatility. Playing a wizard, I couldn't see me doing this all the time. There's
No.
a few favoured cantrips that I would probably always want to have on hand, but perhaps I might, those situational ones that, we just talked about it, and I used the example of mending.
Yeah.
The barbarian rolls a 1 on an attack roll, and the DM rules that they've broken their nice shiny great axe, and you've got a barbarian in tears who's looking at a small axe and a stick and where his great axe used to be, and the wizard can say, "Don't worry, we can fix that." And the next morning, after a long rest, indeed, the barbarian's all happy again because he can go back to smiting things with his axe.
Making that change, so being able to swap out the dungeoneer selection of cantrips for the town social situation role playing selection of cantrips, maybe sneaking in the old Jedi mind trips of friends. You might
Indeed.
normally steer well clear of that. That's nice. That's I think gives wizards an extra bit of.
Yeah.
It removes the need to make a difficult decision about, I want to be utility, I want to be useful in combat. Just be useful in combat when you're in combat, and then take a long rest. Suddenly you've got some more use in town or wherever else. Additional wizard spells, and of course the new cantrips.
Yeah, the new cantrips, some of which are reprints from other places, some are new. The wizard has the biggest spell list, so why should they not get also the nice new spells that are in Tasha's? There's some interesting additions there. So augury, for example, which used to be just the domain of the divine spellcasters. I would question, who are you asking as a wizard? Just the forces of magic,
or whatever his name is.
Old Fizzban,
yeah.
Yeah, but you're just asking
Vecna.
either the goddess of magic or the forces of the universe, I guess.
Yeah.
One of my favourite new spells, which we haven't covered on any of those others, and we'll do a whole thing on spells and spell casting and the wizard class. But Blade of Disaster, which has been added in Tasha's, is a spell that's well worth looking at. It is a 9th level spell, so it's obviously going to use your very precious 9th level spell slot. However, it specifically states in the spell that it can go through a wall of force. and this
Yeah,
is the only thing, as far as I can see in the game, that can penetrate a wall of force. So
yeah, I think that's right, isn't it?
that's very nice, especially if it's your wall of force it's penetrating. So you've cast that little hemisphere of wall of force on your enemies, and you're swishing in with your blade of disaster.
Yeah, that's a
That's
lovely
it's a really
combination.
nice spell, and it's worthy of a 9th level spell slot,
Yeah.
definitely.
Looking at the new cantrips very briefly, Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, maybe not the most useful for a Warlock unless you're going down the it's Gish, isn't it? Fighter wizard sort of approach.
Yeah, or there's
Uh,
the Blade Singer
yeah, of
subclass.
course, yes, Blade
Um,
Singer. Yeah.
Useful for a Blade Singer, probably not so much useful for your Abjuration or your Divination or Conjuration Wizard, who's just trying not to get anywhere near the front line of combat.
Thinking about augury, that's probably maybe from a wizard's perspective, that's you sort of reading the stars and doing a
Yeah,
bit of the old astrology or looking at the flights of birds and stuff. But the unseen flow of magic in the world that
indeed.
leads you to be able to read things. I don't know.
And they do get access to all of the new summon spells in Tasha's as well. So that's also nice. There's some nice spells in there.
Yeah, it's a good range. Good
Yeah,
range.
good range.
And that, I think, concludes our whistle stop tour of the optional class features in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything.
Yep, it does indeed. If you like what you've heard and would like to see more from us, please remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell to be notified of any new videos. If you don't like what you've heard, then please do all of those things, but then have a comment, leave a comment, discussing what we've said, and we can have a discussion in the comments about that.
Look forward to it. Take care. See you next time.
Bye bye.